My name is Nilakantan. I wrote the piece for ThePrint on the adoption of English as a medium of instruction for schools across the various states in India. Right? Now, let us look at what precipitated this issue. The National Education Policy of 2020 sort of laid emphasis on Hindi, Sanskrit, and what it calls other Indian languages. Right? Now, it wants to privilege these three buckets of languages over English. You could argue, what is an Indian language, right? Like, is it one that is spoken in India? In which case, given that I'm speaking to you in English and I am in India and I think you are as well, does English count? Becomes complicated, right? And or is it one where a language which originated in India? If that is the case, well, according to some records, Sanskrit originated in Central Asia. So does Sanskrit count? So it is complicated. But the point is that, park that aside, the question then becomes like, the explicit push for Hindi, Sanskrit, and Indian languages seems to be to eliminate English as sort of, a natural language of education and emerging as a linked language across states that, don't speak Hindi with states that do speak Hindi, right? This seems to be the push because you don't have to take my word for it. The deputy chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Official Language, Mr. Mathab, said that when the report was being presented, the committee's report, the 11th report of the committee was being presented to President Murmu, right? They wanted to eliminate the colonial practice that English is. That was his quote. So given that this is the political intent, the question then becomes, what happens to states that do learn English at higher rates or teach their children in English at higher rates compared to states that don't, right? Now, the easiest way to do that is to look at, the wage rates in states, and, wage rates meaning, per day's wage for non-agricultural labor. And if you see the top three states, they happen to be Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Punjab, right? Interestingly, these three states are also states with an above average or significantly above the average adoption of English as a medium of instruction. Right? Now, you could argue these three states also happen to be relatively wealthy states, and therefore, it is natural that their wage rates are higher, which is why the counterfactual or to them, like for instance, let's take Tamil Nadu, the counterfactual to Tamil Nadu should not be a state like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, which is generally not as industrialized as Tamil Nadu, but, take the really industrialized western states of Maharashtra or Gujarat, right? Maharashtra and Gujarat, despite being very industrialized and quite prosperous, have wage rates which are roughly half that of Tamil Nadu. Now, interestingly, those western states also have adoption of English as the medium of instruction at significantly lower rates, right? Now, does this point to English being the only reason why there is a difference in these wage rates? Obviously not. There are counterfactuals for that as well. Telangana and Karnataka, for instance, offer significantly a different story, so to speak, right? But it seems to be true that in general, if the population has a greater number of children going to English medium schools, the wage rates in that state are significantly higher, right? That seems to be a basic fact. Now, given that this is the case, why does the government want to push Hindi, Sanskrit, and Indian languages down the throats of children when there seem to be two things? One is, by their own volition, children and their parents seem to be migrating towards English for obvious reasons of, greater pay. And the other aspect is that, there seems to be, as people get richer, they seem to be choosing that, right? Like either way you look at it, it seems to be that, people are choosing English. Now, if people are choosing something, why would politicians do the opposite? It makes absolutely no sense, right? Now, wherein lies the important question. Why is it that people learn languages? People learn languages in my mind, for four reasons, right? One is for economic value, as we have just discussed. If that is, if all evidence that we can sort of point to basically points to the fact that if that is the case, people choose English. The second reason why people learn a new language is generally for assimilation. If they have sort of migrated to a different place, they want to learn the language of that particular place and assimilate into that population, right? That is not something that, you can have a national policy when the country is diverse linguistically, right? And therefore government shouldn't, at least at the union level, shouldn't do much about it. Third is if you want to sort of explore the human condition in that particular language. This generally happens when you can speak it reasonably well, but you want to read the literature of that language to sort of explore the human condition, which is the primary purpose of literature, right? Now, in that case, again, that is something that doing it at the union level is problematic, and therefore people should do it at the state level depending on where they live, etc., right? And finally, to access cutting edge research, which generally happens in English and not in any of the Indian languages, regardless of how you classify Indian languages. Now, given that Hindi, Sanskrit, or other Indian languages do not check all these boxes most of the time or all the time, the question is doubly problematic as to why the NEP would actually push for this, right? And on top of that, there comes the political grievance of states that do not speak Hindi, because their grievance is that if you push Hindi and therefore take away the possibility of English emerging as a natural link language, then they stand at a distinct disadvantage, because if the natural link language then becomes the natural language of the country, then the ability to speak that language is obviously going to be better for somebody who speaks it as a native language, right? So, and this has driven the politics of many states in southern India for generations, right? And therefore this becomes problematic, which is why I end by quoting the former chief minister of Tamil Nadu, C.N. Annadurai, who also happens to be the founder of the DMK. He said this during the debates in Parliament about adoption of Hindi as the sole official language and sort of doing away with English. And he said, since every school in India teaches English, why can't it be our link language? Why do Tamils have to study English for communication with the world and Hindi for communications within India? Do we need a big door for the big dog and a small door for the small dog? I say let the small dog use the big door too. All that is needed is the big door. Both the big and small dog could use it. It is colorful, and it belongs to an era where politicians were scholars and also spoke with a lot of color. If C.N. Annadurai or an equivalent politician today had said this, there would be like non-stop news coverage of it, calling them anti-national, right? But thankfully, in C.N. Annadurai's times, this was not the case. But what he said, his sentiment sounds potent. Why is it that, on top of it being unfair in that, people from elsewhere who don't speak Hindi have to learn, firstly, they have to learn their own language, then they have to learn English, and then they have to learn Hindi or Sanskrit, which becomes like, they have to learn 3 languages, whereas the person from, let's say, Uttar Pradesh or Bihar just has to learn 1 language. It sort of seems unfair. But over and beyond that, just as a utilitarian point, well, if you learn English, you get paid more. So why would the government of India, in all its wisdom, push for something else? That is a question.